what I'm describing is the general relationship between Western powers and we'll call it the developing world or the third world or the global South, whatever you want to use. But basically, you have the West and you have the developing world, and the relationship for hundreds of years has been somewhat similar. First, it was naked imperialism, and then now it's more of a financial repression story. There are unique and specific instances of what I would refer to as monetary colonialism that are good examples of this. And the most obvious case is found in West Africa and Central Africa. So, for example, the French used to have straight up imperialism over a massive amount of the global South, including a huge chunk of Africa, right? So in the 50s and 60s, they were forced to decolonize. They didn't want to. They fought an unbelievably horrific war in Algeria because they really wanted that gas there. They ultimately had to leave. But they really didn't want to give up claims over these 15 countries in West and Central Africa, from Senegal to Togo to Mali, Central African Republic, for couple different reasons. One was cultural and linguistical. They wanted to keep spreading the French language and culture, and one was resource based. Like they wanted the uranium that was in the Sahara Desert in these countries. France gets lauded, I think, properly for having a really great nuclear program. But what most people don't know is for decades, all of that uranium was essentially stolen from their monetary colonial subjects in the Sahara, in places like Chad and Mali. So an enormous amount of like French culture and prosperity and standards of life were subsidized by repressing these people in 15 countries in Africa. And it was through the currency. So basically it's called this, on the street, people call it the CFA. It's the colonial French franc. That's what it's still called today. There's a really good book about this called Africa's Last Colonial Currency. I think your readers will find it really interesting. And I also have a chapter in my book, Check Your Financial Privilege, on it. But essentially, the CFA is controlled by France. It used to be tied to the franc, and then now it's sort of tied to the euro. But between 44, when it was invented in the late 90s, it was devalued 99.9% against the franc. So basically, the French squeezed all this economic life out of these countries. And if you look, they are not only are all 15 authoritarian states, so no democratic development. Also, they're like 7 or 8 of them are the poorest countries in the world. We're talking like Guinea-Bissau, Niger, etc. So Chad. So these countries were stripped of their prosperity and in industry by France intentionally. And it's a shocking thing. It's totally shocking. Like people and the country itself, like when the country for a long time, these countries had to keep 100% of their reserves, like their national earnings in forex in Paris. And when they wanted to have some, France would charge them. So France got access to all this capital. They also had a market to sell expensive stuff to. So you go down to like Dakar, all the cars are French because France just sold stuff to these countries. And then there's this thing where, like, if you are in Ivory Coast and you want to build a bridge or something, you have to first go to French, contractors and offer the job to them at a higher than market rate. And only if they refuse can you go to the Americans or Chinese. Similarly, if you're selling coffee, you have to go to the French first, sell below market rate, and only if they refused can you sell someone else. So it's basically
this is today or in the past?
This is today. Now, certain things have changed very slightly, but the colonial currency continues to exist today, and all these countries are still in it because France props up dictators throughout the region to protect the system. So it's pretty intense. But basically, what I'm saying here is that this is an extreme example of the broader thing I'm describing, which is that Western countries through the currency exploit peripheral nations and they subsidize their way of life this way.